Hello, and welcome to the Red Bank Humanists podcast. Each month, Red Bank Humanists hosts a public forum featuring speakers and topics covering a wide range of subjects of special interest to the humanist community. To learn more, including information about our monthly book club and our Drinking Post-Theologically events, visit redbankhumanists.org and follow us on Twitter at Red Bank Humanists.
I'm Trudy Lagan, the Vice President of Red Bank Humanists. Thank you for joining us. I'm happy to see you all here. I thought of the idea of this panel discussion while driving through Seabright last winter and looking at buildings in various states of recovery. Some buildings were back to normal, but there were others with red X's or fences around them, and yet others in the process of being razed. I was haunted with questions like, where are the people who are supposed to be living in those houses? Why is their house just being razed now? And how are they surviving mentally and financially? I recently saw a documentary about sea level rise entitled Shored Up, which was followed by a panel discussion of environmentalists. I kind of went to check out the competition. My takeaways from the presentation: sea level is rising faster than expected, so beach replenishment is just delaying the inevitable. Storms that we have considered 100-year caliber storms in the past are expected to occur more frequently. There are many hard questions that can't be ignored. I don't need to tell you what a horrible storm Sandy was. We all have stories about what we, our friends, our family, or our neighbors lived through. Unfortunately, you can drive 5 miles to the shore, and as you drive north or south, you will see many people who are still living through this. For these residents and business owners, Sandy is not just something that happened 2 years ago. It is something they are still trying to persevere through. The primary goal of the committee that organized this panel is to bring Sandy back into view. We wanted to rekindle discussion about how Sandy is still impacting the Jersey Shore, so that way we might be able to inspire people to help each other. I would like to introduce April Clumley, a journalist, PR consultant, and an award-winning writer. She's a member of our Sandy Panel Committee and will be the moderator of today's discussion.
Thank you, Trudy. Trudy, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Is this mic going? Okay. I want to welcome everyone also for coming today. Trudy has really set the stage for our Sandy Snapshot, which is what we're calling it. And she explained what our goals are, which is to inform you on a deeper level of what's been going on in the last 2 years, what's happening now, and what the challenges still are for what's ahead. Of course, it's hard to do a panel even as carefully chosen as this one, because Sandy affected everybody here on 3 levels. One is locally, and that's how we're most strongly affected: our homes, our businesses, and Ocean and Monmouth County's biggest business, which really is tourism. So all of us know that that's been affected and still is. Secondly, Sandy affected us on a national level because people had to start immediately dealing with the federal government through FEMA, and you'll hear more about that later. Because disaster recovery money came from the federal government, but it's been, some of it, or a lot of it's coming through the state, so everybody involved has had to deal with the state. And then there's the issue of the flood maps and insurance. Finally, I want to go back to what Trudy was saying about the global aspect of this disaster. Storms like Sandy are sometimes called extreme weather, and whether or not anyone believes in global warming, there's more and more of that around the world. So we obviously need to be much more prepared in this state of New Jersey for events like this. And the preparedness brings up all sorts of issues on how to protect our coastline and communities in it. And we will be discussing some of those things today. We're fortunate to have a wonderful, well-balanced group of speakers today who are going to give you a full picture, I think, on most of these issues. I'm going to introduce them first, all four of them, and then they're going to speak, starting here with Tricia. So I'm going to just give a little background. Tricia McAvoy is a homeowner in Brick who suffered a whole series of disasters, including the near destruction of her home through Sandy, and in the months afterwards. She had to move out of her home, and she's now back in as of April, but not completely, the home is not completely habitable. And she's going to talk about this, how she dealt with this series of disasters and what pulled her through. Next to her we have Shauna Sullivan, and we're very happy that Shauna is the Director of Constituent Affairs for two of our state-elected officials, State Senator Jennifer Beck and Assemblyman Declan O'Scanlan, and we thank them for lending you to us today. A big part of her job over the past 2 years has been to help people rebuild and get all the help they can from various federal programs, and maybe even with their insurance. And this includes something called the REM grants, R-R-E-M grants. That's the acronym for Reconstruction, Rehabilitation, Elevation, and Mitigation. I'm just mentioning what it stands for because she's going to talk a lot about it, and it is one of the biggest points of contention and difficulties right now. In our third seat, we have Britta Wenzel. We welcome you, Britta. Britta's a business owner and homeowner very deeply affected by the storm in Ocean County. She was also on the council of the borough of Lavallette in Ocean County for several years, but she's coming to us today in all of the personal roles, but also as head of Save Barnegat Bay. And we've asked her to focus on that and the environmental aspects of the storm and the aftermath and how it's affecting us here in New Jersey and going forward. Finally, our fourth speaker is Jennifer Mayer. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming to speak today, because I'm sure Jennifer's asked to talk all the time. Jennifer is the Borough Administrator of Union Beach, one of the two worst hit towns in the shore area. The other was Toms River. And she's going to talk to us about what happened after the storm hit and how her borough has gone through a recovery and what's going on now. So each speaker is going to speak to us for 5 to 7 minutes, or actually 6 to 8, I guess, actually. And we do have a timer who will help us keep track of this. So when I give a warning signal, I hope you won't feel it's a 2-minute warning that I'm being a bad guy. I'm just trying to move things along. And then after our speakers give their presentations, I'm going to spend a few minutes asking some additional questions so that they can sort of talk to each other or comment on what each other said and add some insights. That'll only be 10 minutes. And I will ask them then for a 1-minute wrap-up of going forward, what they think people can do to help. Because part of this, our thinking behind this is, feet on the ground, what more citizens can do going forward. And then we'll open it to a round of questions from the floor, as we always do. And I think that Stephen, who is the former president of the Red Bank Humanists, is going to be bringing the mic around. He knows how to do that, and please save your questions for that part of the program. Okay. So here we go. Tricia, take it away.
I apologize, and this is why the microphone's gotten closer, because I think I have a frog or something in my throat, and I apologize. But I'd like to thank all of you for having us today, remembering that we are still here and we still need your help. I've been unable to move on in the past 2 years. If it had not been for the support and resources of the volunteers, missionaries, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, Ocean County, and Monmouth also has a county long-term recovery organization, SHRAP, Hope and Healing, and Preferred Behavior, and the Visitation Relief Center in Brick, especially the Visitation Relief Center, which is still operating as one of the last relief centers in New Jersey. Thousands of Sandy survivors have come through their doors. A relief center offering emotional, physical, and financial support with supplies, food, construction crews, physical, financial support with supplies, and a community organic garden and a tool lending library, which is kind of unique because as we all lost our snow blowers and lawnmowers, and what do? You need more important things than going out and buying a lawnmower. They actually have tools and equipment that you can borrow and bring back, which is a unique asset. As they call themselves the Recovery Warriors, they have been there from the day after Sandy hit the shore, and they will be there until all their families return home. In hope, as a part of my personal recovery, my son made me a Christmas sign as a gift. The sign, it's of hope, made with sand from the beach. Seeing all the pictures and destructions in the media, we did not have to be reminded daily of all the losses as we were living the disaster. I said enough was enough. I took the sign up and down the barrier island, taking pictures of people, places, things being rebuilt, people making a difference, recovering from the storm. To me, these pictures show the real Jersey stronger than the storm people. And art therapy for me became a sign of hope for so many people of the Jersey Shore. The people in the book of pictures all have that one glimmer of hope, a smile, that when they held the sign, they knew we would all make it somehow. After being displaced for 19 months, in May of 2014, I was semi-able to return to my home. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I will be spending my first Thanksgiving and Christmas home in 2 years. I have already spent over $100,000 using insurance money and savings to repair my home, but I still have additional major repairs to the home. I need to elevate the home and repair a storm-damaged bulkhead, all of which is estimated to cost me well over $125,000. I was able to obtain a REM grant in the amount of $46,000, and I have $20,000 left in funding and savings. But I cannot put a shovel in the ground until I find additional funding, as the government has placed deed restrictions and code upgrade requirements on my home. As the rules and regulations change daily and the funding dwindles, my future often looks bleak. So after all I've been through and done to rebuild my house and return home, I still may have to walk away, like so many others. But I am still lucky, I'm vertical, and the sun is shining. I have my sons, my family, friends, and hope. There are so many others out there who have not even started the rebuilding process. The elderly, those overwhelmed, swamped in paperwork, no help, no money, confused, no advocates, and surprisingly some, still living in mold-infested, gutted homes which have not had one bit of help. Sadly, many lost individuals, many lost as individuals, but we all lost as a community. And I do not believe this is what the President and Congress wanted for the Jersey Shore. So where's the money? As funding is running out and there is so much more work to be done, sadly and realistically, the climate is changing and disasters like Sandy will and are continuing to happen all around the world. Are we prepared for the next disaster here at the Jersey Shore, or will all the time, effort, and money spent here have been for naught? But for me and so many others, our world and environment needs so much more. To paraphrase the boss of New Jersey, the modern-day troubadour, Bruce Springsteen, well, tomorrow there'll be sunshine and all this darkness past. Dreams will not be taught and faith will be rewarded. And our government, we say, wherever this flag is flown, we need to take care of our own, our environment, and our future.
Thank you so much. Tricia, we really appreciate you sharing that with what you've been through, which is very painful, and explaining that to us and also looking forward with hope. Shauna is going to talk about helping people like Tricia, get through the process in the two legislative districts which her people represent. And so take it away,
I'm
Shawna.
going to try to follow that up. So thank you, Tricia. And so Sandy caused about $36.9 billion worth of damage and needs, which is something that is hard to categorize. And immediately after Sandy, we rolled out about 50 different programs and initiatives. And maybe we rolled them out too quickly because, as you've seen, the first wave of funding was sort of a disaster to get out to these folks. So a lot of what my job has been hearing from families and people who are still in need of funding and who need help navigating these overwhelming sort of government blockades. Sorry. And I go and I speak to the commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs on a regular basis, and it's been a learning experience, I think, to find out how we need to operate most efficiently. And one of our main problems has been that after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, the government was thwarted with a lot of fraud, and they put a lot of stoppers on the funding and tried to flow it out with so many checkpoints that it's really bogging down homeowners in paperwork, and it's taking a long time to get this funding out. And so it's been a learning process and a learning curve over the time that we've rolled out these programs less than 2 weeks after Sandy. So one of the biggest programs is our $150,000 grant. It's the REM program. And that, I think you'll see, has been probably the biggest issue with homeowners. Now, that program is supposed to fund recovery, rehabilitation, elevation, and mitigation. And there's been 3 waves. The third wave we're still waiting for, but we have to get all our funding from the federal government, and we have to go to them to get everything signed and all the paperwork, and we have to go through the process, a 60-day, open period to speak about, and they come back to us. So it's been sort of a long time and all of these checkpoints that we have to go through, and all these homeowners have to go through without taking into account that these are real families in real homes that need to get back. So the process has been very long, and as she said, there's a lot of paperwork. So what I do is they come to me, and I try and push them through this process as quickly as I can, because we're trying to advocate for the fact that, like I said, these are real families. So we also have the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which is the other big program. It's a $30,000 grant that's used primarily to elevate homes. The problem with this grant program is that it's reimbursement. So a lot of the folks in the areas that are hardest hit who need these funds are something called LMI, which is low moderate income. Their income is less than 80% of the median income in Monmouth County, and they can't necessarily afford to be reimbursed. They need the funding up front. And I think something that we're not talking about that was one of the primary issues was the insurance payouts. A lot of people, were lowballed on their insurance money. They paid into a program that they expected to take care of them, and when it came back, they didn't get a return on their investment. So then to work with that, to fight for 2 years with an insurance company, to be exhausted after that fight, and then to fight for another 2 years through the paperwork, through the government, that we're trying to make as efficient as possible, but, like I said, it's a learning process. It's been really hard, and we get a lot of people who are very frustrated by the time they come to me, and rightfully so. Of course you're frustrated. So I try to do my best to, like I said, speak to the commissioners, speak to these high people, and say these are problems that we need to address. We have housing advisors that don't necessarily understand flood insurance, that don't understand the complexities of the job they've taken. These are people who were hired very quickly to sort of try to take on this massive problem that we have, and they weren't necessarily as prepared as we might have liked. So it's something that we deal with every day. It's still very much a problem, and these grants now are moving into a new wave as we got the second wave of funding, and we have something called an environmental review that you need to get done, and the federal government, like I said, has all these checkpoints that we need to go through. So we have an environmental review that takes 30 days, and then you have an initial site inspection where someone will come out to your home, and they'll try and figure out how much work has been done and how much money you should be paid back. and that takes an additional 30 days after that. So getting those scheduled is something that we're working on right now, because beforehand we had it. People were just sitting on a wait list for almost 2 years, not with any movement and not with any real communication, which is something that's been a problem that we're also working on, is that homeowners weren't given as much information as I think they should have been, and there hasn't been a great open dialogue between the state, who's funneling these federal funds to homeowners, and trying to explain to people that it's not necessarily all us, that we wouldn't necessarily like to have to go through all of these checkpoints with you guys, but that it's something the federal government requires of us. Another big issue I think that people need to talk about is the duplication of benefits. People needed to come out and they needed funding right away. A lot of people went out and got SBA loans. And those are things that have to be taken into account when you get a grant, is they look and they say, well, HUD has to be the funding of last resort, which we've advocated for a long time with the federal government, with Secretary Sean Donovan. And so your loans have to come first. So then you get, that money is deducted from your possible $150,000, which elevating a home is very expensive. So there's all of these nuances to grant programs and to how the funding comes out that I think a lot of people still have questions about, and I would really like to answer those questions for you guys. So,
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Shauna. So, Shauna, you've really brought home to us how complicated it is for people to get what really they deserve or what is coming to them. And it's more complicated than a person would think, looking from the outside, who wasn't affected like that. Now, we come to Britta. Britta, welcome. And Britta's going to talk to us about Save Barnegat Bay, and also if you want to talk about your experience as a homeowner and business owner.
I don't know if you can hear me. Is that good? Move over this way a little bit. So my name is Britta. It means clean water, for anybody who hasn't heard that before. It's actually a Swedish name, ironic because of the work that I do. I'm the executive director for a 44-year-old nonprofit environmental group based in Ocean County and a small part of Monmouth County as well. And our work is really to protect and restore the Barnegat Bay, which is the largest body of water in the state of New Jersey. And I also happen to live on the Barrier Island in Lavallette. I'm born and raised in Point Pleasant in a family-owned and operated boatyard. I'm Scandinavian. I don't hide that well. And I am married to my husband, Brick, who is a commercial fisherman out of Point Pleasant. He's a gillnet fisherman. And sort of typical to local folks, we own and operate seasonal tourism business. So we normally have a restaurant which serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner family style, and 2 ice cream stores, and a nautical gift shop. None of those things are open and operating right now. The boat has almost $300,000 worth of damage. Our businesses and home combined is $1.5 million in damage. And then I have my other hat, which is Save Barnegat Bay, and the Barnegat Bay was probably the most environmentally impacted natural feature of the state. Although the pictures on the news and the media are of the beach and the homes that were hit by the wave action, in fact, it was mostly the surge that came over the island and a quarter-mile inland where people were not told to evacuate, and they had the Atlantic Ocean in their living rooms, like Trish. So when that water receded, it leaves something called a rack line. That's where it dumps all the things that floated or got pushed by the force of the water. And so part of our effort and how I met Radiance and her friends from the Visitation Relief Center, we were in the woods cleaning up the wildlife refuge that our organization had protected some 25 years ago, picking up decks, roofs, boats, jet skis, household hazardous waste and things like that. And to give you an idea, myself having been in government, so another unique feature of local folks, I happen to be a Democrat, my husband's a Republican. He served for 12 years on our town council. We got married and I ran against him. And I served for 6 years. But knowing the government officials, the folks that Radiance was friends with didn't know they needed permission to clean up the wildlife refuge, so I got all these phone calls from higher-up folks who said, you know, you need a permit to do that. And then, of course, when we met with the government folks, they looked at this huge debris field and said, we don't even know where to begin. And we said, we do. Order some dumpsters. And we got the volunteers out there, and through the efforts of local folks in Bricktown alone, removed 13,000 cubic yards of debris by hand. So what I thought I'd talk about with you today, I have some unique experiences, I think, is one, the long road to recovery for businesses. So in my stretch of the island between Manloking and Ortley Beach, they're redoing Route 35. It's a reconstruction project. It's massive. It's like Dukes of Hazzard every day. I work in Bricktown, and I drive up the island and back. It takes normally less than 15 minutes. Right now it takes about an hour. And you take your front-end suspension at risk and tires and everything else. So even if you were stronger than the storm and were able to reopen your pizzeria or whatever it is you might have, there are very few patrons coming down the island. And you probably don't have parking, and it's hard to get deliveries. So, although we really rely on the tourism industry at the shore, it was really a bit of false advertising, in my opinion. And many people who said, okay, kids, we're going to go down and we're going to support the shore, went down and said, what the heck are we doing here? Where are your sneaks to the beach? So it's a long road to recovery, and the businesses, many have exhausted their personal savings. Their families and friends have loaned them money. Even patrons, had some kids who loved our ice cream store drop off a check from a fundraiser. How do you say no or yes? I'm not sure. One of the things I actually heard someone from Monmouth County saying in the news was that the state put funnel cake before homeowners. And it took me a while to sort of figure out what she meant. But in all honesty, those of us that were sitting in the 2x4s and plywood floors, and the kitchen sink was a bathroom sink, it was pretty tough to watch people coming on holiday and celebrating and then sort of gawking in your window about how you're doing and when you're going to be reopened. So I have very mixed feelings about it, and I think this is a really good place to talk about perspectives. I don't know how I'm doing on time. The second item was local government and planning. So from the Ocean County, and I guess Monmouth, you're not that far away, perspective, many of you may have read Time Magazine rated Ocean County the #1 most dangerous place in the nation to live, and Monmouth County ranked #4. Ironically, you're required by FEMA to have a mitigation plan, a hazard mitigation plan, which would help a community identify the risks and hazards and plans to deal with those risks and hazards. There was one county in New Jersey that didn't have one in place when Sandy happened, and that's Ocean County. And we also happen to have the oldest nuclear power plant in the country, Oyster Creek. And I don't know how many of you know, you might want to Google this when you get home or on your phone right now, but Oyster Creek came within 6 inches of overflowing its cooling pumps during Sandy. And so for folks who were in emergency management, police departments, public works, that came over the radio. That's very scary and very real, and you would think that Ocean County would be the first county to have a hazard mitigation plan, and it actually limits the local folks' ability to obtain federal funding going forward. We now have one because the feds said, Ocean County, get your act together quick, and we'll stay on board while you do. Obviously, there wasn't a great deal of community participation because folks were dealing with their own scenarios at home. And the last thing, Barnegat Bay, I don't know if it's last on my list, but so Barnegat Bay is an estuary that's very important to the migration of animals, for example, up and down our seaboard. So for those of you who are not in tune with that, my husband's a commercial fisherman. In the spring and the fall, huge biomass of fish travel up and down our seacoast. And they use Barnegat Bay and other estuaries as a place to reproduce, to have their young, in part because there's fresh water coming into the estuary and there's salt water, so it's not so salty, and there aren't as many predators. So they have their young there. That's how we ensure that we have fish populations and bird populations and bug populations and all these other natural things. Well, Barnegat Bay and Ocean County its watershed grew in the last 40 years as one of the fastest growing places in the nation, from 180,000 people to just about 600,000 people. So that's enormous growth. And a lot of those homes ended up in areas that are hazardous along the waterway, right? So you can also go to Jacques Cousteau online, and you can see their sea flood planner, and you can put in your address and notice that even if we have a very small amount of sea level rise versus medium or high, the damage is almost the same. It doesn't actually ratchet up that much because the density is all along the coast. So what's happening is the biggest problem facing Barnegat Bay is overdevelopment and specifically nutrient pollution. So fertilizers. Our organization is the one that wrote the fertilizer law. It's the strongest fertilizer law in the nation to limit nitrogen. And how am I doing? Okay. Nitrogen is a naturally occurring element, and it feeds green things. So what happens is there's too much nitrogen in a raindrop that drops from the sky already from atmospheric deposition, fossil fuel burning. It hits a roof, a driveway, a sidewalk, a road, instead of something green like the pine barrens or a tree to absorb the nitrogen. So as it runs down your driveway, it gathers more fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphorus from soaps, things, also oil and other things, heads down near a storm drain to the nearest creek, stream, river, or bay. And then it causes everything that's green in the bay to grow too much and too fast. So you're talking about algae, for example. Many of you who may live on a lagoon or live on the bay see these large algae blooms. That's coming from too much nutrients in the bay. And then the bay itself is a shallow estuary. So at its deepest point is 6 feet deep. You can almost walk across the whole bay. So what we really want is a healthy garden along the bottom. So sandy soils with a plant here or there that's coming up like eelgrass. And then the shrimp, the crabs, the clams, the fish, they can live in that habitat and reproduce. However, if the water is so mucky, not clear, from the turbidity of boats or from all of this nutrient pollution, the sunlight can't reach the bottom to the plants that we want to live there. So it creates this dying and decaying algae, doesn't live very long like us, and it goes to the bottom and smothers all the good things on the bottom that we want to live. And it creates what's considered a low oxygen zone or a eutrophic condition in the bay. And so the one animal that does excel in that environment is a stinging nettle jellyfish. And that jellyfish is a predator, and it eats larval fish, clams, crabs. So what we have in Barnegat Bay, the largest body of water, which also dictates a lot of our tourism income and quality of life, is a big dying, decaying mud puddle by the end of August, basically. The good news I'll give you is every year in the winter, the westerly winds coming across the country flush all that out into the Atlantic Ocean, and the bay has a chance to come back. So if we can change the things we do on the land and be more cognizant about the pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, and things that we are applying to our properties, and also have additional vegetated areas that can absorb those nutrients, we can have a healthier bay. And so, okay?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking a ton. So I think some of the things that we're not talking about very effectively as a community is the climate change and sea level rise issues that are facing our communities. I do feel that because of Sandy, many more people are involved in the conversation, or at least listening a little harder about those topics. I do think there are new construction features along the beach that are happening and along the coastal areas, which are elevating both homes and infrastructure. So to give you an idea on Route 35, the prior planning, and I only know this because my husband's father served 18 years on the town council, the old school thought was that the highway would be the lowest point in the community because it would act like a drain to take the water out of the area. Well, the new codes make the highway get elevated. So if you go to places like North Carolina, Miami, the standard is for the federal government now to raise that infrastructure. So actually, what's becoming the low point where the water's going to go are private properties, homeowners. So if you would, take a look and start to see. Now, homes are being lifted unless you can't afford or you have to make another decision, but it's certainly going to change the way the natural features work on the island and in other places. Also, because of these elevated properties, the demographics are necessarily going to change. So basically 50 and over, a lot of folks are leaving the island in those sort of dangerous areas because they're saying, I can't afford to do this again, or I physically can't do it. So the homes are going up. That means it's likely to be younger people, and we're actually finding that already, that there's younger folks investing in the properties on the beach. Well, that's really great, that we're going to have new people coming back that will sustain our communities. But I think one of the challenges for all of us to talk about is how we're going to do that sustainably. What's the smart future look like? So the houses are higher, the road is higher. They're really not putting in effective bikeways, for example, on Route 35, yet it's a huge, it's one of the biggest infrastructure projects post-Sandy. I don't know if that's happening up here. After a serious situation like this, you would think, for example, the Route 35 project would use native vegetation. We're all learning about the importance of native plants. We hired a landscape architect to review all the plans for Route 35. In fact, most of the plants are coming from Asia. We made these kinds of mistakes in the past. If you look at Island Beach State Park, we have Kobo karamugi, which is an invasive plant on the dunes that was put there by the state. So there's really a lot that forums like this and groups like yours and individuals who write letters and participate can do going forward, like planting native plants in your yard, reducing the amount of fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides that you use, participating in your local government meetings in terms of developing evacuation plans, hazard mitigation plans. Some legislative hearings that I've been to, humorously, there was a map one gentleman had. They were redoing the coastal area zone maps. And he says, well, there's this one lot, and it's just because of the codes they can't develop it. And it seems crazy because everything else is developed. And I'm sitting there like, yes, but you're not a local. The reason why that lot is not developed is it always consistently floods, And people there locally know that. And you know things about your own community that you've noticed. There's a certain road you don't go down on when it rains because it floods all the time. Well, you know that. That's fact. So participating in your local government is really important for those evacuation and mitigation plans.
I think, Britta, most of us, many of us live here or stay here in this area because of the water and because of places like Barnegat Bay. So I thank you for spending so much time on the environmental side of your experience and your responsibilities now. Now we're going to move to people side, I think, really the communities, because Jennifer Mayer is going to talk about Union Beach and what really happened there. It was so hard hit and seems to have had, from talking to her, some of the largest changes in terms of the homes. And so she's going to talk about what's happened, how it's been handled, and what's going on for the future, some of which touches on the environment that we were talking about. So go ahead.
Okay, so hopefully the mic works because I'm very soft-spoken. But so I'm just going to give you a couple of statistics to start off with. 85% of Union Beach was flooded. Overnight, 5,000 people were out of their homes. In terms of the demolitions, we've had 300 homes come down to date. In terms of people's financial situation, the insurance on, everybody had like a $250,000 policy. The average money that came from that policy was $60,000. The average mortgage that people held was about $130,000, and their average income is about $60,000. So just with those numbers, there's no way that anyone could rebuild, especially when a new home could cost easily $200,000 for a very modest, 950 square foot to 1,200 square foot home. So very early on, we started talking to the Department of Banking and Insurance and sending spreadsheets of every bit of data we could get on our residents to try to have them hammer the insurance companies to get increased amounts, because initially it was even lower than the $60,000. And I would say every single resident that we had to get a insurance adjuster to fight for them. There wasn't anybody who got the money they were supposed to get up front. So with demolition, right after the storm, a guy came to me. He was from California with a group called Burners Without Borders, and they're the group that builds the giant pieces of artwork for the Burning Man festival, the art festival. So he came in with two young ladies, one from Reno and one from California also, and they said, we'll come and we'll demolish homes for you. So he said he had been up and down the Jersey Shore, nobody would accept their help. So I said, yes, bring it on. And I have to say that my philosophy from the day after the storm was, I told everybody who was there, just say yes. Whatever anybody says they can bring, say yes. Work with them however they require that you work with them, but just say yes. If we get too much, that's okay, we'll deal with it. So this group came in, and they took down 150 homes for us. And we were lucky to get some funding for equipment rental. We got some funding for fuel, but they were just amazing. And then we ran into a little FEMA glitch where FEMA said, okay, we'll pay for the debris removal from the curb of those 150 homes, maybe. We'll find out when we get audited. But we're not going to do that anymore, and we'll only fund a home to have it demolished if it is ready to fall down tomorrow, unless you can prove that it's structurally unsound. Well, we had 100 homes on our list for demolition, 100 more homes, and they only selected 8 of those 100 homes. So I was, fortunately, I cry a lot on camera without meaning to. It just sort of comes. So I was crying about that, on an interview, and 7 demolition contractors came in and took down the rest of those homes for us. And so that the homeowner only had to pay for their cording. We also got donations of money for people who were unable to pay for their cording, and we got another 100 homes down. So, first thing is you got to, clear the decks or you're not going anywhere. So we now have another 100 homes on a list with the state, because the state now has a program where they will take down homes for people. And, if we end up with 5 out of those down, I'll be very happy, but we'll see what happens. So one thing I want to say about volunteerism, which was staggering to me, is that we had, as of even a while ago, this isn't super recent, we have more to add to that, we had 300,000 hours of volunteerism in town. And those were people who came in from all over the United States, and primarily they were faith-based groups, the Mennonites, Jewish Federation, Southern Baptist, Northern Baptist. They just came in by busloads. And in working with them, they were very humble, didn't want any accolades for what they were doing, didn't want to be recognized. They just said, we're here to be of service to people. That's our mission, that's why we're here. And they're still here. They're still helping us. Samaritan's Purse is clearing lots and doing demolition for us. Jewish Federation has been an enormous help. So, and a lot of schools and kids came in, college students, so we've just really been blessed. We also have it in our senior room, we have Gateway Church of Christ. Now, Gateway came in immediately after the storm. We housed them in our senior center. Seniors aren't too happy about it, but they're adjusting for now. And they're actually doing work all over the Jersey Shore. They're going in and renovating homes. They did a lot of the initial gutting out, the mold remediation, and now they're rebuilding homes. And they're also doing hand demolition of homes. So they are the, if somebody wants to volunteer, they go through Gateway. That's basically how we do it now. And Gateway provides all sorts of other resources for people also. So right after the storm, the day after, because I wasn't there the night of the storm, I was home. My neighbor got their house cut in half by a tree, so I was kind of moving them into my house. And we were very lucky. You know, we had out of electricity for a little while, and 14 days, and then we were back in action. So, and luckily that enabled me to go down and really do what I needed to do in Union Beach. And what I saw was immediately after the storm, I saw the disaster, but I saw enormous opportunity and to rebuild smart. And I'm an architect by trade. Part of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps, trained by Al Gore. And I just thought, how can we do this to try to make a positive impact, set up a prototype, and have a positive thing for climate change? So I got funding from $2.25 million worth of funding from the Hurricane Sandy New Jersey Relief Fund and the Robin Hood Foundation. And we so far have built 12 homes. They're eco-friendly solar homes, elevated to FEMA standards, actually above FEMA standard. Bamboo flooring, no VOC paint, rain gardens, rain barrels. The driveways are all turf stone pavers, so the rainwater goes right through them. All native plants, recycled roofing materials. We use a hardy board siding, which is very mildew and mold resistant and much more durable than vinyl siding. And we have we worked with Grid Alternatives to do the solar. So anyone who's low income, we contribute $6,000. They do the whole project. So we have 2 more families to get in. 12 families are home now and very happy. And one of them has a lift also. The next home we're going to do is actually for somebody who's wheelchair bound since she was 3. So it's going to be a 100% ADA, fully accessible home. And the next thing we're running into now is, one, we have a shell heap, which is an archaeological site that they discovered in the mid-1800s that some Indian tribe had left behind, and the Historic Preservation Association wants to come in and re-explore those properties. There's 45 of them who would be disturbing the soil to rebuild because they're stepping outside of their footprint. So those people are now held up again. So we've been fighting, lobbying, nagging, complaining to try to get that process moved along as quickly as possible. So right now they have to come and dig holes and look for shells, and if they find mussel shells, these people are going to be held up again. So we also have a problem where the federal government has a program for ramps, but not for lifts. So our people are now like 10 feet in the air, and the ramp for that would cover their entire property. So we're also lobbying to have that changed over to, there's a lot of funding there for lifts, which range, outside lifts are about 20,000, interior lifts are about 37. So we're fighting for that also to be changed. So now the homeowners who are what they call Pathway C, which are the people who are using the contractors who are hired by the Department of Community Affairs to do the construction versus going Pathway B, where you hire your own contractor. That process is moving slowly, and for a lot of the reasons that Shauna talked about, that the state has to answer to the federal government, and the red tape and bureaucracy is unbelievable, and it actually gets worse each time a new funding wave comes out. It gets worse. So we're trying to help move people along there. $100 million was given out through the SHRAP program to try to help people, just to help them survive until they could rebuild. But now that all that funding has run out and people are paying rent, mortgage, and taxes, and if you're paying $2,000 in rent a month that you never had to pay before, and then you still have all your old expenses, they're very quickly going down. So with there's also a gap funding initiative that people can apply for that's an additional $20,000, that's an add-on to the $150,000 if you get that full amount. But again, what's happening is people in the Pathway C, they get to the very end, they've been told, let's say their rebuild's going to cost $100,000 and they're going to get $100,000 worth of funding, and then at the very end, the last step, they're told, oops, we're sorry, your home's going to cost $150,000 to rebuild. You need to come up with half of that, and we need that in 30 days, and you need to sign this paper within 30 days. So they're already broke, no money, and now they're being hit with this. And this is the newest crisis we're seeing. So we're trying to do what we can to get gap funding from anywhere we can, Monmouth County Long-Term Recovery, to try to help them, and also just to help them where we can with financial help for rental, just to try to hang in there for that little bit extra time. And in terms of the human element, I just want to touch on that for a minute. Since the day after the storm, there's been people in my office continuously, crying, upset. We've gotten them counseling, free counseling, help with their mortgages, help with their finances, legal help. Any resource that somebody comes to me that they have a problem with, we try to get a resource for them at no charge. So there's been a lot of life-changing things for people in a positive way that they wouldn't have had access to, and we wouldn't have been able to provide if not for the storm. We've received probably about $5.5 million worth of grants and assistance from different groups. The Tzu Chi Foundation, which is a worldwide, they're a Buddhist organization from Taiwan. They came in immediately after the storm and gave out close to $400,000 in gift cards. Colts Neck, New Jersey adopted us, and they just did a concert with a young lady from The Voice and raised $45,000 for Union Beach. Madison, New Jersey adopted us also. We have more than one parent. And the Robin Hood Foundation also gave us hundreds of thousands worth of gift cards that we did as an appliance program for people. Is that that's the final before that's it? That's right, yeah. Okay, so I'm done.
Jennifer, thank you very much. And what you were saying, even though it's a terrible battle to get the resources you need for the people in the borough, but it reminded me of the Chinese saying crisis is also opportunity. And I think they're fortunate, as an architect, you've been able to see some also new things, bring new things above and beyond what might have been brought. So now I'm just going to ask a few questions for on issues that may or may not have been touched on too thoroughly, so that everybody can, all our panelists might chime in, or if they have also a topic that they felt they would have liked to address that someone else spoke about. But first, I want to ask Tricia just to tell us briefly what she lost in the storm, because she didn't really go into that. She was very diplomatic. But since we have someone here really just...
Okay, I think I can do this now. Well, I didn't want to discuss it because it's a long, involved story and a loss, and everybody had loss, but in 6 months, our family had more life-altering events than people have in a lifetime. In August before the storm, I lost my mother. Come the storm, we were not evacuated. That area I'm just a quarter mile where I live from Manalocan Ridge, but we were not evacuated, not voluntary or mandatory, and they said, well, maybe you want to move your cars, but you'll be okay. So we all stayed, and all we could hear were trees crashing and the explosions of the transformers, and it was just and I'll never forget a gurgling sound around 11:30 at night, and it was pitch black, and the water was gurgling up through our carpeting, and within 20 minutes we had 3 feet of water in our living room. And now what do we do? And we couldn't get out at that point. We tried to drive our car out, but they were all flooded. We lost 3 cars, and so we were there, and my son's friend had what they call those snorkel jeeps, and he came in as far as he could, and then we got kayaks. We brought our kayaks into the house. They were level with the dining room table. We got in them, and we just went out, and I had my 95-year-old father with us because it was going to be safer at our house. He has a house in Point Pleasant Beach, not a drop of water. So here's this 95-year-old man walking outside in 5 foot of water, and it was just a horrific evening. And they spoke about not believing in the bad and everything, and it was like, why did this happen? How come we weren't evacuated? And they said where I live, it had never ever flooded like that. But what we heard afterwards is that because of the 3 breaches in Manalocan, the surge came through, and that's why we lost our home and our cars. And ironically, of those 3 breaches in Manalocan, 2 of them back in the 1700s were natural inlets. So the water found its path, and it came back through. I guess Mother Nature says, forget it, we're coming back. So, and then I mentioned the trees, so we got through it. I mean, we worked on our home and everything, and a refrigerator had come down the lagoon, had put a hole in my bulkhead. All the dirt went out into the lagoon, undermined the deck, compromised the foundation, the middle of the house sunk. But it's a story that many of us here and others have heard before. But when the trees fell down, girlfriend up the street from me, a tree fell down between her house and her art studio, and the insurance company came in and said, you have to get that tree out, dig that dirt out by hand. And everybody was shell-shocked and went, okay, we'll get in there. And her husband tragically was in there on Thanksgiving morning trying to get the dirt out, and the tree uplifted and crushed him to death. And that was our Thanksgiving. We had no Christmas. And my son said, Ma, I don't think I want to go back to school. He was in college. He says, because whenever I go back, something happens. I says, no, you got to go back. And he went back on January 26th, and his father, my husband, died on February 3rd. So in those 6 months, we lost family, friends, our houses, our cars. But as I said before, we're vertical in the sun shining, and we just have to move on. And I just thank all the support I've gotten over the last 2 years from so many people, and thank you very much.
Well, Tricia, thank you for giving us that look into what it's really like for someone who's gone through this, because we've all heard this and read about it, but it is very tragic and hard to pull out of it and affects people in other ways. I want to ask a question of Jennifer, but Britta also kind of touched on this, whether or not the population has really been going down because of this in the towns along the shore. Actually, anyone who had some light to shed on that, just in general.
Okay, so yes, we absolutely have had more foreclosures. We've had a lot of people just walk away, they put the keys in the mailbox and they just leave. So we've tried to help people with their mortgage to refinance it, to put some payments on the end instead of now. They did that initially, but they said, we'll give you a 6-month leeway, but at the end of the 6 months you have to pay the full amount that you would have owed over that 6 months, which was completely unrealistic and ridiculous. So we tried to work with them to get that extended.
What I can say is the Barrier Island is very different, for example, from Bricktown or Toms River or perhaps other areas up here on the mainland. So on the Barrier Island you have a sort of a transient population effect. So on my block there are 5 year-round homeowners, and many of the other homes are just shore homes that people use in the summertime or maybe the shoulder season. The impact, like Trish had said, your life goes on and you age, and whatever the underlying conditions of your life are, they're exasperated. So, for example, I had one of my tenants committed suicide last month because he had other aggravating situations, and by losing work and home, and that just brought all of that to the forefront. And one of my neighbors also, we lost because of his health conditions, and he just couldn't make it through all the challenges. So it's certainly, I think it's the human impact that doesn't make it in the headlines or isn't part of the statistics. But the reality is, if you have a drinking problem, a drug problem, spousal issues, there's divorces, it's really happening. I know for me, out on the island, it's really happening out there. And there isn't a lot of sense of, well, you could rely on a neighbor because they're empty homes, or maybe they're just seasonal folks. And then I think on the landward side, where there are people a higher percentage of people who live there year-round, the media seems to have forgotten about those homeowners because it's sexier to show the beach, right? And so if you ride through the marsh areas in Bricktown or Toms River, Green Island, even down to Tuckerton, those spots, there's people still living, like Trish said. I mean, we both are in the Visitation Relief Center where a lot of folks are coming for help, and literally living in mold-infested, not treated homes. And then next to them maybe is a home that people just walked away from, which is also just sitting there rotting away with mold. So even in the homes that are fixed, the dust and the mold spores that you get regularly, it's really a lot farther from recovered than people are talking about, I guess.
I think I have to say some of us, this isn't the right way to put it, suspected this or are aware of that, but it's not in the press, it's not in the spotlight the way it was even last year. Maybe when, great. Shauna.
Okay. So another thing that I think is that the stages of recovery we're seeing are different. So if you were lucky or capable enough to get back in your home, now your home is reassessed, its value, and you have higher taxes, much higher property taxes than you might have been capable of paying prior to the storm. And people are moving away because of those reasons too. And they're in a lot of places where you might not have been able to, barely afford your property taxes prior, and now you have the hit of the storm and the recovery, and people are leaving now just because they can't afford their property taxes. So I do think that's something else we need to look at.
I guess a related question to that is, what about the flood zone announcements and insurance? Shauna, can you address that, or does anyone on the panel know whether people are having to pay more now because of that? And
So After you get a substantial damage letter, you have to elevate your home. It's kind of part of the process. And your flood insurance now, once you receive federal funding, you are mandated to maintain flood insurance. Otherwise, you will not be able to receive it next time. That's something we found with a few homeowners who we advocated for who didn't maintain flood insurance from Irene and unfortunately aren't eligible to get REM or HMDB funding. And these insurance policies are very high, and we've had several people, I must have over 200 cases come across my desk just of Sandy cases in general, probably more than that in 2 years. And they're $200,000 policies, but people are skeptical, to say the least, because they were lowballed last time, of maintaining them. So I do know that we are advocating with Dobie right now, but it's something that we have to go to the federal government for because the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, is the one responsible. So it's sort of an ongoing conversation at this point. But.
Jennifer, you had something to say on this.
Yeah, we've also run into that same issue with the insurance where, and with the mortgages you mentioned. With the mortgages, that was one of the reasons why we did the prototype project, to show that if you put solar on a home, it can offset the increased tax and make the property financially sustainable so that the homeowner doesn't lose their home. Also, just by insulating the hell out of it, you reduce the energy costs from what they were paying before. So with the insurance, the worst situation we've seen has been a homeowner who followed the FEMA flood maps, and then FEMA came back, and you may have seen it in the news. This homeowner did everything they were supposed to do, along with the floodplain manager in our town, and afterwards FEMA came back and said, no, we disagree. We're going to use this other map. And according to that map, you were supposed to have a completely open foundation, meaning with piles as opposed to concrete block. So we're going to charge you for your flood insurance another $33,000 a year, and you have to pay us the first 2 years up front. So I don't know about any of you, but I certainly don't have $66,000 sitting in a bank account anywhere that I can throw toward flood insurance, and it's an ongoing, now becoming a major legal battle with FEMA. And it's hard to fight the federal government. So, but we have seen a lot of, on the positive side, by elevating, and we actually went an extra foot above what FEMA required all throughout the town. We're seeing people's insurances reduced from $3,500 down to $350. It's significant once you do elevate.
Now, with the elevation of the different flood maps that FEMA's been using, there's the increased cost of compliance that you can get with your flood insurance to elevate your home. And I've had one case, just to kind of make it personal, I've had one case that we fought for 18 months because FEMA was using the wrong flood insurance map, the wrong map. And the insurance company was using the wrong map, and they didn't want to pay out. So this woman, we wrote several letters. She appealed 3 times to her flood insurance. She appealed 3 times to the NFIP, and then we had 4 administrative reviews that I personally wrote to FEMA. And we finally did get her the check in hand, but 18 months of fighting because someone was using the wrong map. So it's like I said before, it's a very convoluted process, and you need to come to us in order to try and get us to advocate for you. So.
I have about one more question, and not about immediate steps that are being taken, like restoring the beaches, strengthening barriers, but what our panelists think about whether or not our counties or our state are more prepared going toward the future, or whether what should be done on that kind of level, if at all, to reduce the chance of this kind of, I don't want to call it chaos because it wasn't chaos, but so whether there's been better emergency planning on the part of the counties, or more should be done on a state level, or whether, there are some plans I know in Louisiana for really changing how the water edge of the water is managed. So it's sort of a big question, but I wondered if you had any thoughts on this.
There's a a couple ways to approach it. One is, we had Rutgers come in, and a gentleman from Princeton, he's their top climate change professor and researcher, and he came in and he said, if sea level goes up 2 feet, that's 200 feet inland. And I had Rutgers come and present to the planning board to explain to them, with a map to show what areas of town are going to be underwater by 2050. And I said, if there's anything you grasp from this, just look at what effect it's going to have on the town. The other thing, obviously, is elevating with a really strong foundation with flood vents so the water can flow through, piles with diagonal bracing, just building so that you're more resilient. But when you ask the question, the first thing I thought of was that the main issue after the storm was housing, and that if the fort had been immediately opened to its full extent, that would have alleviated a massive amount of problems. They wouldn't bring FEMA trailers in because Union Beach is in a flood zone, so they won't put a FEMA trailer on somebody's property if it's in a flood zone. So people had nowhere to go. That was the major issue, and it still continues to be the major issue. So if they just had like a gazillion units of housing somewhere that were empty all the time unless we needed them, it would be perfect.
I'll just add that, I don't think when you're a locally elected official that there's any level of expectation that you would be capable of managing something like this. So there's no pre-required education to be a local governing body member. So these kinds of events require bigger planning and participation at the local level, because, again, the locals happen to be the most knowledgeable about every road and how things work in a particular town. But there has to be some level of coordination at the county and state level, because when something impacts your community like this, every council member was impacted. For example, they couldn't show up at your town meetings we were discussing. I sort of thanked God that I wasn't on council when it happened, because I couldn't do the business, my nonprofit stuff, and help to put the town back together. So, on the other hand, putting together hazard plans during a storm or right in the immediate aftermath is not a good way to really have full participation. So, to me, I saw the insurance companies with RVs that you could sort of go into a parking lot and have a meeting with your insurance rep. But I didn't really see a lot of FEMA trailers or county OEM. It seemed like those resources, those more regional planning entities, really weren't visible for people to get the resources from. And the other thing that I wanted to sort of add, probably because I'm a local for a long time, there was a diver who was in my story. He's a commercial diver. He's deaf in both ears. His name is Ribby. And he was having a cup of hot tea the day before the storm right in my store. And he said, with his squealing hearing aids, "Hey, Britta, there's going to be 4 foot of water right here." So sometimes it's that crazy guy who lives in the shack who's been there for generations who actually knows. And we put up man-made dunes on the barrier island, which gave us a false sense of security for many years in big nor'easters or other storms. They worked. That's the magical part. I mean, they did protect our properties. But when that more serious storm came along, and it wasn't even a Category 1, but it was a different kind of storm, we live in a very fragile environmental place. And those folks that refuse to evacuate put other people in harm's way. You have to evacuate when you're told to evacuate. You have to be smarter. You have to know where the river, the creek, the stream, the bay. You have to have that mark on the outside of your house where in 1990 this storm hit or what have you. Because that knowledge that Ruby had could have helped so many people. So that voice has to be in the planning process.
Hey, Britta, thank you. I think also Jennifer kind of did a little bit of a wrap-up. Sean, if you want to do a little bit of a wrap-up, because then we're going to go to let everybody ask questions.
And, we need to have a more broad discussion of planning in regards to just the different, we're experiencing winters that are a lot harsher now, and they're exacerbating some of the Sandy issues that we have ongoing. And just to speak about what, Jen Mayer was speaking about, the housing problem in Monmouth County is very difficult right now. We do have an affordable housing issue we're working on. And there's some programs from the Department of Community Affairs they've brought out. The Neighborhood Enhancement Program is one. The funding is unfortunately gone, but the monies to build affordable housing complexes that could be utilized after disasters in Monmouth County is very difficult. We don't have these huge high-rise places to build. We have small little complexes, and the money and the grant is kind of geared towards an Essex County, a Union County sort of blighted areas that have 100 units as opposed to maybe the 5 or 6 that the Affordable Housing Alliance in Monmouth County normally builds. So we really need to have a conversation. I think a conversation like this is really great with you guys here, because in order to get anything done, we need the squeaky wheels. So we need to include everyone in this conversation, that we need to advocate for more housing, a broader sort of climate change is happening, a broader sort of conversation about how we're going to fix our communities at the community level, and then to move forward to the county and the state and the federal level. So.
Tricia, do you have a couple words to say to sort of wrap up about what should happen in the future?
Wow. Well, the only thing I can say is Mother Nature is telling us we better get our act together, because it's just going to continue. And we call that a barrier island for a reason, and it wasn't a barrier because the water came through anyway. So we need to be better prepared.
Thank you very much. Thanks to our panelists. And now we're going to throw this open to the audience. Before we do, I just wanted to say that I am aware that the state has a hazard mitigation plan. They have updated it for 2014, and all 21 counties are developing their own hazard mitigation plans in conjunction with that. Now, I don't know where that stands. It's nothing I've researched, but I just wanted to throw that out. Maybe that's a step forward. Let's see. Okay, Stephen's going to go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question.
Yeah, the way we're gonna work this is raise your hands, and I'll try and keep track of whoever you are and move around the room. So just be patient. It's almost 12 now. We're going to go, normally we end at 12, but we're going to extend today's program till 12:15, 12:30. So if you could please be patient and wait till the end of the program. Okay, I got you. I'll come around in a sec. And so if you want to leave, maybe now's a good time to leave. But if you could just remain patient and stay till the end of the program, we'd appreciate it. So I got a couple people. I'll keep you in mind. Just be patient. I'll get around to everyone.
I want to know what is all these houses that have had mold. My house has had mold. What kind of things are going to be in place for health issues down the road for all of us who have endured this mold, or you have a house next to you that's still vacant, that's mold now, spores, or it's a live organism. It's growing, it's breathing, it's spreading. Is there any kind of things in place that are going to help all of us people that have affected by mold?
Britta, do you have any thoughts on that?
So that's really an environmental health hazard question. That's not my priority area in terms of my knowledge. But there are environmental health organizations in the state who I believe do have literature available both online and in paper form. And it should be available at every municipality, at least that's been affected by the storm, because it is such a significant issue. I was just saying, personally, my husband takes 4 mold tablets a day because it's so bad in our community still. Because you're breathing it in, you have the fungal spores in your esophagus, and so the doctor gives you a prescription. You can go and get tested, And there was also an organization that was coming around, Radiance, do you remember the name of it? They were giving free mold testing to folks. It's a charter bus that can come around to municipalities, and they'll do a swab of your throat to tell whether or not you are currently. So the chances are, if you have residual breathing issues or a running nose or any of those things that you would normally think is an allergy or a cold, you should go to your doctor because you probably do have underlying mold issues. And it can get worse. If it goes beyond your esophagus and into your lungs, then you have to have respirator-type treatments on a regular basis. And so immediately following the aftermath of the storm, a lot of first responders had that significant of an impact. My experience personally, and again, I'm not an expert, is that in these communities, folks have sort of this residual experience happening, and it's because it keeps getting kicked up again, or there's a neighborhood home that hasn't been rehabilitated. So it's, like, as you said, just continues to grow, and it's a community health hazard. In Texas, I believe there are laws, for example, along the coast there where they have repeating storms, that within so many months, if someone doesn't deal with the home, the state goes in and demolishes it. And I think that's kind of where we are with that list as the state of New Jersey, because the municipalities are struggling, to deal with the problem. Again, the local electeds, nobody trained them for this. So it's really the state and federal government that have to step in with larger resources and access to deal with those problems.
And you can reach out to our office, and we'll see if we can put you in contact with anyone who might be able to help out with that. It's not something we've had many people come to us to deal with, but it's another issue about the storm that's coming up, and it's something that we should probably take care of. So if you reach out to me, I'll give you my card afterwards, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, just real quickly with the mold. You can't fix mold. Everything that mold touches, you have to get it out, drag it out to the curb, kill it. And all the wood has to be treated that was exposed to mold. It's really a deadly thing, okay? I do want to say that we have done air testing outside of the homes that we know still contain mold. As long as those homes are closed up, you're okay. If their windows and doors are all open and they're infested with mold, then there's an issue. So I probably wouldn't be there the day that it comes down if it's being demolished. I'd probably take a weekend away. But other than that, it's not something to be taken lightly.
If you see a house being torn down and the fire company's there wetting it down while they're tearing it down, it's really likely there's a mold problem inside. So they're trying to wet down the spores as they tear the house down. So just if you see that, it's probably what it is.
Also, Deborah Hospital has a department specifically if you've been exposed to mold. I went there and got tested, and they're really wonderful, and they really don't charge you if you're a Sandy survivor.
Oh.
Which hospital was that? Deborah Hospital.
Where is that?
Shauna, I have a couple questions for you. Basically, I'm panicking right now because we have October 28th as our deadline with the insurance companies. I've filed everything, proof of loss, all of that. I'm fighting them. They're nickel and diming me. The flood insurance company basically hired a third-party company out of Alabama, and they're not giving me anything more. So I have like a third of what I need. I haven't done anything with the house because I don't know what to do, what direction. So 2 years now, I'm renting in Holiday City. I have $100,000 contents. They lost all the photos. My original camera was destroyed. I don't have anything to give them. So Selective is saying that they lost the photos. The third-party company said that they never received anything from Selective. So I have $250,000 worth of coverage, $100,000 contents, and I received a little over $100,000. In addition to that, I don't know if you know if they're going to extend it again, or October 28th is the deadline.
Well, we haven't heard anything about an additional extension, but it is something that you haven't signed anything with your insurance company officially, or you're in the appealing process?
They sent me a denial letter a couple months ago, so I know I have more time.
Okay.
But do I need to go to an attorney to litigate as a backup?
My
In case they
suggestion
don't.
would be that we would go to the Department of Banking and Insurance. Depending on who your insurance company is, we can always try and advocate that way. If you haven't signed an acceptance of whatever they're giving you, we can always try and advocate that way.
Okay, I'm dealing with both.
Okay.
Flood and homeowners.
Okay.
The state, the Department of Banking and Insurance said that they really can't help me with flood because it's federal.
Yeah.
Homeowners, they gave my packet to a state investigator who sent me a form letter back reiterating everything that I told him, saying, well, they claim that they gave you so much money. I'm like, no kidding, I know that. They gave me like a separate piece of paper for an additional $8,000. They didn't give me anything for broken pipes. So that, I'll contact the manager on Monday. But they weren't helpful at all.
Okay.
In addition to that, I had a very disturbing occurrence on Wednesday regarding REM. I tried to contact my housing advisor. Her phone is always, the voicemail is always full. Finally got through on Friday, still haven't heard back from her. Two young men from Gilbane Construction came out. One was an environmental guy who took a piece of sheetrock to test for asbestos, all that. He was wonderful. The person that came, that was going through everything, he seemed annoyed when I told him the extent of the damage, including the broken pipes behind the wall. I found the original plumber to my house who said everything, the walls have to be taken down. This is horrific. I know what the damages are to the house. He was so cold, didn't want to hear anything, didn't seem to know what he was doing. And then he said, the state isn't just going to hand you over a check for $150,000. Now, I know I have to elevate. I know I have to go on pilings. I'm on 4 feet of peat. And he just doesn't. Okay. All right, so basically, what can I do? Because my grant award's going to be in this man's hands, based on what he said, and I don't trust him.
It's not going to be in his hands. He is going to do the environmental inspection, and then it's going to be in the hands of the actual grant advisors. So it's going to be someone completely different. But I think to keep everything brief, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to you directly, because I'd have to call the commissioner, and we'd have to have a sit-down conversation with him, because these are the things that I need to hear about, because if no one comes to me with problems, I assume everything's fine. So you just need to, I'm going to give you my card, we'll have a private conversation, and we'll handle all of that.
Hi, I'm Joyce. I'm from Aberdeen Township. I'm their only loss, which I'm lucky for the others, but very unlucky for me, because I've had to literally advocate for myself. I went to other, neighboring towns and was turned away because I wasn't a resident of their town. Now, I've been disabled since 2000. I was in a dry zone. My primary home, I've been living in January, will be 2 years, in a 28-foot RV. Finally, I was waitlisted, which anybody with the word disabled should not have been waitlisted, period. My income is 175% below federal poverty level. I got waitlisted. There's no forgiving for that, none. Anyway, I got this young man, of course, my house is gone. I wasn't required to have flood insurance because I was in a dry zone, and so I got, a stack of denial letters from my homeowners. I'm finally, 2 years later, getting action, but the emotional toll I had to have special medical treatments over the summer, and then ended up in the hospital there is no more CMD counseling out there. Why not? there is, I called and I was directed to some, here's somewhere here, I know, believe me, I've been in Union Beach. They thought I lived there. Oh yeah. I've been there so much because that's where all my information was coming from, Union Beach. And I was given an organization and asked about my insurance. I have Medicare. I'm not paying 20%. I can't afford that.
Where's Stephen?
I know. No, I've had. They've caused me. I know what you're talking about. They've caused me a real lot of serious problems.
Stephen?
I know what organization you're talking about.
Stephen, Chris, I think we have someone who is a counselor in the audience and who might be able to help you. So if you come to me after this, I will refer you to that person. And we only have like 5 more minutes, and please try to put your question first, because we really, our time is limited to a couple more questions.
There was a lot of discussion that the Christie administration had either impeded or stopped funds from going to Democratic stronghold townships and towns. Accusations, I think the mayor of Hoboken was one who said that, they're just putting blockades in our way. That sort of disappeared. Do you know anything about what actually happened or what the resolution of that was, or is it true at all, or can you comment on it?
Okay, so I used to work for the mayor of Hoboken, so I can tell you I wouldn't believe anything that came out of her mouth. But outside of that, all that aside, okay, she had gotten a huge amount of funding already in Hoboken, but she wanted all the funding so that nobody else would get it, basically. Okay, so she had, I don't know if it was $73 million or some amount that they had already received. So that information was incorrect, and she has subsequently gotten additional funding. I haven't experienced any issues, Republican, Democrat. I haven't seen that. It's, the governor's been helping any flood-damaged town, and there really isn't the ability to play those kind of games, because there's so much accountability with the federal government, with who's getting what and why, that really can't happen.
I don't have any specific knowledge except for my experience, which is in most local towns, the most corruption generally revolves around the building department, because construction is money, and where there's money, you'll find corruption. So we're in a gigantic rebuild, cleanup, post-Sandy, so there's garbage contracts and rebuild contracts. There's so much going on. So I think without Democratic or Republican tags specifically, in New Jersey we'd be fools not to recognize the fact that stuff is going on. Again, the only thing you can do, and it's, having been a local elected official, when you're done with it, you kind of go home and go, ooh, we all have that burden of responsibility to be involved and to ask the questions. And I can't specifically answer your question other than say that, yeah.
I think as a whole, Sandy has been a very bipartisan effort, and I do think that personally, my bosses, both of them, are Republicans, and we've worked very strongly with Congressman Frank Pallone, who's a Democrat, and we've worked hand in hand across the aisle in the state and the federal government. There's probably been some people who might have tried to play it off as an election stunt or something, but I don't think that's been the effort. I think most of it's been trying to get people back in their homes regardless of who you're working with. So.
We're going to take just 2 more questions. I know you had your hand open. This lady had a question.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Denise. Shauna, this might be for you. Basically, I'm having the same information I want to pass on to people with the flood insurance. Now, I'm a little confused because my house is going to be demoed soon. So now they're telling me there's a couple different stages if your house is demoed, then once the pilings go in, and then later on, the pricing of the FEMA and the flood insurance. I'm a little confused with that. And to answer your other, just quickly, I've had back and forth with the state with see if they'll knock it down, and the state won't do it because I'm in Forkett River, so I'm a little tiny pea in the pod, and they won't do it for me, and now they won't pay the gas bill connection either. So that's another issue. But I'm trying to work with Cory Booker's office. They called me, but I want someone who specializes in flood insurance. So do you have someone who specializes in flood insurance to help me and answer all these questions?
And now, is this your ICC process you're going through for the elevation, or is this just...
I'm going through the REM, and I have the ICC, and I have, and of course, the GAP.
Okay.
So now I'm getting the flood insurance, national flood insurance bill,
Yeah.
and the housing insurance.
Yeah.
But now I'm getting all these different amounts coming and going out of what the statement is, which I brought my statement to show you. So I'm a little confused on what am I supposed to be doing. Am I getting 3 different prices for 3 different stages of my
Your
building?
best bet is always to go to your local state representative, and then they will speak directly to the Department of Banking and Insurance, and they will find someone for you who can explain this or who can advocate for you properly. I think it's very difficult to go to specifically a federal senator because they have the entire state. They're not quite as specialized.
Okay.
So I think you'll find better resources for you at the state level who can then direct you to other people. You said Forkett River, so we have to find your
Forkett River.
district. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm just
Yeah.
trying to find out where to start, and that's my question.
Yeah.
Is where do I start and
Your
what
district,
stage
District
am I
9 representative.
at? District 9? Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, this is going to be our last question for today. If everyone could just hang out for a little bit.
I want to know from Britta if now the hazard plan, from what she says, we came pretty close to nuclear disaster, almost something like what happened in Fukushima. Has that been addressed now? And I want to know from the mayor of, are you the mayor of, the administrator? Okay, good for the solar houses. It's great. I'm an environmentalist, and so I applaud you for that. But what are you doing to protect? You criticized Hogan's mayor, but she's doing major things to protect the whole of her town. What are you doing to protect the whole of your town? Just building a couple of 3, 4, 5 dozen houses with solar isn't going to cut it for the town. You're a big problem. You need to address your big problem. And you're not comment, but I ask my questions. Okay.
You have 2 questions, 2 in 1. Okay, 2 in 1. Okay. Quickly, Britta first.
Quickly, although we could have a whole meeting on Oyster Creek nuclear power plant, it is included in the hazard mitigation plan. They did develop new evacuation plans and send out a glossy brochure to every household. The sirens that all failed during Sandy have been replaced. All failed, have been replaced. So, if you're close enough to the plant that you hear the siren, you at least know something's going wrong. And that plant is exactly the same design as Fukushima. It uses, however, Barnegat Bay to cool it. So it doesn't have its own internal cooling system. It actually sieves water out of the bay every day. So that's what the aspect of the plant that was really in trouble. Those pumps, the motorized pumps that are used to cool the reactor, are what was going to be overflowed and then mechanically fail. So the state has negotiated an early closure on that plant in the year of 2019. It never... Yeah, so it's still a real problem, even if we have a plan, actually, with regard to that particular plant. And then going forward, even if the plant comes offline, that waste has to stay there until it deactivates a bit, and there will be continued storage there for a long time. That's right.
Okay. Jennifer, you have a little rebuttal here?
Sure. The Army Corps of Engineers has a plan for all along the Raritan Bay, but I don't, Union Beach is portion of that funding would be $15 million. Okay, we have an $8 million budget every year, so we are looking at other ways that funding can come from, and we believe we can come up with our share. But we've also been told rumors that flood money might not come to Union Beach. So I'm also applying for, there's a HUD grant that's anywhere from $1 million to $500 million. And I'm working with our borough engineers to apply for funding for shore protection. But one of the ways to design for it is to allow the water to come in, but get the houses out of the water. It's a very simple thing, and you keep blocking the water and blocking the water and blocking the water, but the sea level's coming up. So, in my opinion, you're better off just preparing for the worst and get your houses out of the water, and don't build in places that you know are going to be underwater. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you actually to, can you hear me? Thank you to all our panelists, to Jennifer, to Britta, to Shauna and Tricia for taking the time to come and talk to us, to prepare what you had to say, to talk and to take the questions. And I think we had some very good questions that brought up some issues we hadn't really discussed in depth. Our speakers were full of a lot of valuable information, and I hope you feel you're going away more fully informed. And if you want to take action, I think we had some listed in on the back of the handout there. And now I want to turn the meeting back to Trudy to thank everyone for coming and give a few remarks.
It's going to be very quick. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So first I wanted to thank our panelists for giving us your Sunday morning and for all the time you spent helping to prep and everything. Thank you. So to you in the audience, thank you very much for coming today. I hope that you found it useful. And if you'd like to join us for lunch, we're all going to Gianni's. The address is on the flyer, so please come if you would like. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Red Bank Humanist Podcast. For more information, visit redbankhumanists.org or follow us on Twitter @RedBankHumanists.